So during the Johnson administration, excuse me. Here's the thing that's kind of interesting about him. He was appointed Associate Director of Public Affairs for the Peace Corps in 1961. He was picked by Kennedy to be an Associate Director of Public Affairs. What does somebody do in public affairs? What's your job? What's in a college, if you're the Director of Public Affairs, what's another name for it? You're the SID, or Sports Information Director. Okay? So he was the guy that was given the job of assisting the director in getting good public relations out about the Peace Corps, and he was given that assignment in 61 by Kennedy. He was a journalist, and he served as White House press secretary from 65 to 67 under Johnson. Now, who's 16? Who's 16? This guy right here. Look at those glasses. This guy right here. Who's 16? Who is that? Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry. 16 is Jesse Curry, with his face being covered by the new president's hand. So Jesse Curry, who was the chief of the Dallas Police Department, we talked about before, and we'll talk about more in the future. He was driving the lead car in the presidential motorcade. That is the scene as now President Johnson is sworn in at 2:38 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963. Okay? So after that's done at 2:46 p.m., Air Force One departed for Washington, D.C., took off. Okay, so after the new president was sworn in at 2:46 p.m., Air Force One finally takes off, departing for Washington, D.C. At 3 o'clock, President Johnson asked one of his aides to call Rose Kennedy, which is the president's mother, obviously. So at 3 o'clock, President Johnson asked one of his aides to call Rose Kennedy. 3 o'clock, as they're flying back to Washington, Johnson asked one of his aides to call Rose Kennedy, the president's mother. Here's the conversation, you don't have to write it down. Lyndon Johnson says, "Mrs. Kennedy?" Rose Kennedy replies, "Yes, Mr. President." Lyndon Johnson says on the phone, "I wish to God there was something that I could do, and I wanted to tell you that we're grieving with you." Her response, "Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know. You loved Jack, and he loved you." That was the conversation between the new president and Mrs. Kennedy, the assassinated president's mother. Now, Johnson was not a man that was very emotional. Matter of fact, he was kind of a hard ass and a very big persuader. He used his demeanor, he would what you'd call today be a bully to get his way. But he became very emotional during that conversation with Mrs. Kennedy. And he became so emotional, he really couldn't talk to her anymore, and he handed the phone to his wife, Lady Bird. So after that particular short conversation, because of his show of emotion, the new president gave the telephone to his wife, who then visited with Mrs. Kennedy as well. And this is the conversation that Lady Bird Johnson had with Mrs. Kennedy. Lady Bird said, "We are glad that the nation had your son as long as it did." Mrs. Kennedy's response was, "Yes, well, thank you, Lady Bird. Thank you very much. Goodbye." And Lady Bird ended the phone call by saying, "Love and prayers to all of you." Okay? That's what happened. The rest of the time, everybody sat pretty much silent on the airplane. Finally, at 6 p.m., and this is a change, at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because everything else has been what standard time? Central. At 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Air Force One landed at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. At 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Air Force One landed at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. And the drama was not over yet. Because who's not very happy? Who? Bobby Kennedy. Okay? So, as the plane landed, Robert Kennedy immediately met the airplane and boarded the jet. As soon as it landed and he was able to get on, he got on the jet. And he pushed his way to the back of the plane to get who? Who? Who'd you say? No? Jackie. He had no interest in Lyndon Johnson. Bobby Kennedy boarded the jet, immediately pushed his way to the back of the plane where Jackie was seated. Matter of fact, he pushed his way right by the new president and didn't even look up to acknowledge him. He simply got on that airplane and pushed his way very forcefully to the back. He wanted to get to where Jackie was, and he actually pushed by the new president and didn't even look up to acknowledge him. Now, what do you think Johnson's plan was when he landed? You got to remember that these guys are putting on an appearance. So what do you think Johnson's plan? What was his vision when that plane landed? What do you think? How was it going to end out, so to speak? What do you think his vision was? How do you see everybody getting off the airplane? Maybe give a little hint. What's his vision? What's that? Sad, but how? What protocol? What? With who at his side besides his wife? Jackie, right. It was Johnson's plan that he and his wife and Mrs. Kennedy would exit the aircraft together with the body of the slain president. That's how he envisioned it. Okay? That he's the new president, that he and his wife would escort the mourning wife and her slain husband, and they would get off the airplane. Because who's going to be at the airport? The media like crazy, right? Okay, and he wants to do this right. No fault of his, he feels like this has got to be done right. So it's his intention or his plan that he and Mrs. Kennedy would exit the aircraft together with the body of the slain president. I'll tell you who had no part of that. Bobby. No part of it. And this was a snub that Johnson would never forget in his life. Bobby Kennedy had no interest in that appearance occurring. Okay? So Robert Kennedy would have no part of that plan, and it would be a snub that Johnson would never forget. Well, Bobby's had a little different plan. And what happened, and you'll see this on video, is not one of those mobile staircases, but a lift truck. Basically backed up to the back door of the airplane where the president's body was. And that's a truck that has a lift on the back that lifts up, because what did they need to put on that lift? The coffin. And they're not going to carry that clumsily down a mobile staircase. So actually a lift truck, and you'll see it, edged up to the open door of the aircraft and lifted up, and that bronze casket bearing the president's body was unloaded onto that lift truck. Robert and Jackie Kennedy departed the airplane, and you'll see how. The casket was placed in an ambulance that was waiting there at Andrews, and it was taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital for what? Autopsy. Very good. So Johnson, where's Johnson and his wife? While this is going on, while the lift truck's backed up, the casket's coming off, and Bobby and Jackie are leaving. He's still in the plane. Okay? So a lift truck edged up to the open door of the aircraft. The bronze casket bearing the body of John Kennedy was unloaded. The casket was placed in an ambulance with Robert and Jackie Kennedy also getting in the ambulance, and all were taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital for the autopsy. Why did they choose Bethesda for the autopsy? Why did Bethesda Naval Hospital? Why did they take him there? Why did they take him to? Well, that's good. That's close. What's that? You are awesome. He's a naval officer. That was his official hospital during his presidency. Very good, Alice. Yeah, he was a naval officer, and every president has their own personal hospital that they go to during their presidency, and Bethesda was his. He had been a naval officer, and that was his official hospital. So, picture this in your mind. The coffin comes off, Bobby Kennedy comes off, Jackie Kennedy comes off, they get in the ambulance, they go, and they don't give a rat's rear end what the new president's doing. So here, awkwardly, is the president left on the airplane with his wife after the Kennedys had departed for Bethesda. So Lyndon and Lady Bird and the little entourage they have then get off the airplane, and what's set up on the tarmac is a microphone where they're expecting the new president to speak about, I guess, kind of the events of the day. So the Kennedys are gone. The body is gone. And Lyndon Johnson and his wife and his small entourage, which probably would include who? Jack Valente, who was in the picture, right? get off the airplane, and Johnson steps up to an open microphone, and at 6:10 p.m., again Eastern Standard Time, this is the message that Johnson gives. His first public speech as what? President of the United States. This is what he says, very short to the point. At 6:10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Lyndon Johnson gave his first public speech as President of the United States, and this is what he said. This is it. This is a sad time for all people. We have suffered a loss that cannot be weighed. For me, it is a deep personal tragedy. I know the world shares in the sorrow that Mrs. Kennedy and her family bear. I will do my best. That is all I can do. I ask your help and God's. That was the speech. Okay? So, here's where we're at, kids. I'm going to stick a video in just a second, and we're going to watch a video called 24 Hours After the Assassination. We watched a video of the 24 hours before, right? The President. Now we're going to show you another video. Now, here's my plan. But I want you to be responsible and mature here. We are going to watch several videos the next few days. That's what we're going to be doing. I want you to bring your 3-ring binders in and follow along, because anything in your notes or on these videos is fair game for the test. So here's what we're doing. We're coming in, we're watching videos Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and then we're having the test Wednesday, right? The test is like 12:55, is that correct? And we're going to meet in the Commons for the test, okay? Once we get back and done with the test, and I think the test will probably take you, the period, it's going to be 70 fill in the blank, 25 matching, and 20 short answers. So it's 110, is that right? My answer's right? 70 and 25 is 95, right? And 20 is 115, whatever it is, whatever that adds to. And it's going to take some time. It'll probably take you the period. My suggestion to you is get organized prior to that. And I feel like I'm doing you a little bit of a favor, give you a Christmas present by not making, you know this in your mind. So you have plenty of time. You've got like 5 days plus the weekend. I would take a highlighter, and I would highlight those identifications on both these ID sheets, because you can bet they're going to be on there. What are we going to put in fill in the blank? You know what I mean? What are we going to have for matching? So get yourself organized, and there will be some short answer questions. So I'm not going to give you a review. Basically, if you've taken good notes, you should have no trouble with this exam, okay? And I think we'll see how you learn. I think you might even be better off. And then I'll give you those back and correct them, and then you can keep them in your notebooks. Then, when we get back from Christmas vacation, we're going to talk about the interrogation of Lee Harvey Oswald and his assassination, which is, I think, incredibly interesting. And then when we get done with that, we'll end up finishing with the burial of the president, right? And then we'll tell you about controversies about Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby, the guy that ended up shooting him. And I think by the time we get done with that, I think you'll have a very good idea in your mind on what you think happened. What was it conspiracy? Was it non-conspiracy? What was your way of figuring out what happened? And I'll tell you what I think the story was, and then we'll move on to Lyndon Johnson's presidency. How's that sound? And we'll probably get realistically to about the end of 1969 by the end of the year. That's my guess. So we'll see. We might get a little farther. I want to get obviously through Vietnam and the counterculture movement, some of those types of things that are important in the 60s. And if we get past the 60s, I want to get into Charlie Manson murders, all these things that happened in the 60s. So if we get to 1970, by God, we'll be happy. If we don't, we'll still be happy. Okay? The weird thing is going to be this, though. We're going to be in D.C., well, you know, way before we're done with school. And so it'll be interesting to see how that works. I've really never gone this early before. Last year we went, the kids had like 4 days of school and they were done. And so this year we'll be back the 6th or 7th, and then you have a week of spring break till about first week in April. So we're going to have about 6 weeks together after that. So we'll have to see. Maybe we can get to 1969 before we go and do the 70s afterwards. I don't know, it just depends. But it's interesting. I think you'll like it. I know this is a lot of material. But I can tell you, you know a lot about the Kennedy assassination, a lot of other people don't, whether it's worthwhile in your life later or not. Anybody have any questions? We'll just wait here. Tomorrow video, we're going to watch 24 hours after assassination. We'll talk about these things that should help you with your test. And then next week, I want to show you the Kennedy detail. It's a great video on the Secret Service agents that protected the president that day. It's incredible. You will very much enjoy it. Okay? Yeah, you can.